to have with me today two speakers who are going to share a little bit about Solar for All programs, both in DC and Illinois. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about just some mechanics, just to make sure everybody's comfortable. If you have questions, feel free to ask them at any point. Please use the Q&A feature. If you use the chat feature, that's fine. We'll catch them. But if you can, use the Q&A feature. I'll be the man behind the curtain, so to speak, collecting questions, and I'll have my camera off during that time period. But if any I can't answer during the course of the session, we'll bring those up in between our presenters, so they have a chance to answer them as well. And I'm just going to do a couple of intros here, and then I will turn it over to our speakers. So just to start with, hopefully folks are familiar with some of this already, but for folks that aren't, the cost of solar has fallen dramatically in recent years, which is, as solar advocates, we're extremely happy about, but there's a lot of work to be done still. And part of that is that few people in low-income communities are able to benefit right now. So we're excited to be joined by two experts in this topic to discuss how communities can help bridge that solar divide and talk more about Solar for All type programs that we're starting to see gain traction in some parts of the country. So first up, we'll have Yesenia Rivera. She is our Solar United Neighbors DC Program Director and also serves as our Director of Equity and Inclusion. So Yesenia led our work as part of DC's groundbreaking Solar for All program. She earned her JD degree from the University of District of Columbia at Columbia's David A. Clark School of Law. During her time in law school, she began her decade-long journey working with and supporting low and moderate income communities. So Yesenia is going to be going first. I'm actually going to introduce our second speaker as well, so I can just let them stay in the flow when they're doing their presenting. Our second speaker is Milena Hessel. She's a senior policy advocate for the Environmental Law and Policy Center, ELPC, based in Chicago, and she works on clean energy development and access, as well as clean transportation initiatives. Milena previously worked for LaSalle Investment Management, performing market research and regional economic analysis, and for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Construction and Engineering Lab. So I'll turn it over to Yesenia first, and then Milena after that. So thanks very much. Take it away, Yesenia.
Thanks, Corey, Milena, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm sharing my screen so you guys can follow along. I'll be talking about the district's version of Solar for All, a little bit about where it started, what the goals are, and then I'll talk about Solar United Neighbors model in specific. So, Corey mentioned, I am the Director of Energy, Equity, and Inclusion for Solar United Neighbors, and I also help run the DC Solar for All program for Solar United Neighbors. Today we're going to talk about DC Solar for All in general, what our program design was, and what we found out about our participants, some challenges we faced the year and a half we helped run our program, and what lessons have we learned, and what are we up to next. So for those that are not familiar, the DC Solar for All program was signed into law in 2016, and it's funded by the alternative compliance payment. And that's basically a fine that is imposed on the utility companies that fail to meet the renewable portfolio standard. In DC at that time, the RPS was set to 50% offset with renewable energy, and there was a solar carve-out of 5%. So any utility company that did not meet those goals had to pay a $500 fine per megawatt. That fine is what they used to establish the Solar for All program. In 2018, I believe it collected about $26 million in fine, and the bulk of those fines go towards the Solar for All program. The goal of the district is to help 100,000 low to moderate income families go solar at no cost to them by 2032. Eligible families will see an offset of 50% in their electric bill. And this is either for tenants or families living in multi-unit buildings. They can use community solar subscriptions as part of the program, and that covers 50% of their electric bill. For single family homeowners that have a decent roof, they can actually get a system installed on their roofs at no cost. It's going to offset their bill also by 50%. So we were part of the first round of Solar for All grants, and they call that the innovation ground, because the idea was to target barriers that the district saw as problems in accessing low-income solar and creating more low-income solar programs for families in the district. Our barriers were the difficulty in identifying and accessing low-income homeowners' roof, attracting low-income customers, and delivering financial benefit to these low-income households. Our personal goals were to deliver the best possible experience for our participants, have them own their system and max their economic value for the homeowners, increase equity in the solar market, provide them with a comprehensive consumer education, and also provide them with long-term support. And provide the district with some insights of what Solar for All programming goals were and what was working and what wasn't. So with those things in mind, we created a model that was focused on ownership and rooted in equity. Our goals was that the client owned their system from day one, that they had a choice of keeping all of their SRACs, their solar renewable energy credits, or they can use the SRACs the first 5 years to cover the difference of what the grant wasn't covered, so they didn't have to come out of pocket, but it was their choice. We had an agreement with the DC Sustainable Energy Utility to offset the cost of those solar renewable energy credits, so we can maximize the number of systems that were installed under the program. And our Solar for All participants were involved in every stage of the process. The way we run our co-ops is that the community selects the installer that's going to work with the group. So from that stage forward, Solar for All participants were always invited. We actually had several selection committees that we had at least 50% participation from the Solar for All participants, because we did this at the same time with our market rate participants. So it was just one group. We added several participants to our DC advisory board. So our advisory board is now up to 10 people. Half of them are part of our Solar for All participation, and we provided them with lifetime memberships to Sun. So if there's any problems with their system or they have any questions, they know they can call us and we'll help them resolve whatever problem. We didn't want these systems to become a burden on the families just because they went solar. These are some of the values that we deliver to our participants. As you can see, all 3 rounds selected Edge Energy as their installer, which meant they received high efficiency sun power modules. They have 25-year warranty on both equipment and installation, which is not the industry standard, especially for installation. They get cellular data backup for their system monitoring, so they can still monitor their system even if they don't have an internet connection at home. They get 1 free checkup at the end of the first 12 months. That was included by the installer because from their experience, if something's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong in that first year. So all the systems got 1 free checkup at the end of the 12 months. And we also added, at a cost to us, a second checkup anytime between years 2 and 15, where if they want to get their panels clean or they just want to check that everything's still functioning, they can just call the installer and have the installer go and do some maintenance covered by us. And they also included a free reinstall during the first 10 years of installation. So if the families have to redo their roofs, they can take their system off at no cost and reinstall it at no cost to them during those first 10 years. Between their electricity savings, which is about 50% of usage, we expect them to save about $11,000 over the next 15 years. If you add the income from the solar renewable energy credits, which in DC, they're about $400. Well, actually, they're a little bit higher. They're around $440 a credit right now. From year 6 to 15, that's another $12,000. So over 15 years, we're looking at a value of $23,000 in these families' pocket that was not there before because we focus on ownership. And like I said, we also provided them with a free lifetime membership to Sun, and that gives them access to our solar help desk. So if there's any questions if their system is not producing, or they think it's not producing, or there's any problems whatsoever, they know they can pick up the phone and call us. We've been fielding questions even after installation and just making sure the customers are comfortable with their systems and that their systems are producing as expected. So we focus heavily on presentations and education. So we created a lot of material. Some we already had, like our information sessions, our email drip campaign, but some things we had to create for the program. We did a lot of intro calls, one-on-one calls when people would sign up for the program and walk them through what they were getting for being part of the program, what were the expectations we had on them as participants, how they had to sign up and complete the income verification. So we would walk them through all of that, and we would follow those initial phone calls with either an email or a paper package explaining what the next steps were, how to do income verification, how to get approved for the program. We try to do a lot of group updates, keep them inform of what was happening when the installer was selected, where the next steps were. For a lot of them, we had to do individual follow-ups because they were not as connected to their emails, or they simply didn't have an email. So there were a lot of home visits, a lot of individual follow-ups by phone calls and letters. Like I said, we created a welcome letter explaining what they could expect of the program, a timeline, the graphic that explained every step of the installation process. The city required them to sign a covenant stating that they were going to keep their systems on their roof for 15 years. So we created a document to explain the clauses of the covenant. So one of the questions that I got asked frequently is like, wait, if I sign this covenant, does that mean the city's taking my house? And it's like, no, the covenant is only saying that you promise to keep it on your roof for 15 years. And if you have to move or you sell the house, you just have to tell the city that you moved or who the new owner is. That was all. There was an incentive agreement where they sign off their SRAC, so we had to explain all of that. We created guidelines for how to notarize the covenant, and we created a post-installation guide where we explain who do they have to call in case there's any problems. We gave them the access to the solar desk. We created a little sticker that they can put on their inverter that has all the information on the warranty and on their system, so they know who's responsible for what piece of equipment. Here's some of our key statistics. We installed just about every ward in the district except for Ward 2. And those not familiar with DC, Ward 2 is where most of the federal government is. It's also Georgetown. It's one of the more higher income wards in DC. So that explains why we didn't have any installations there. But the bulk of our installations occurred east of the river in Ward 7 and 8, which are two of the poorest wards in DC. Our average age for participant was 59 years old. So we worked with a lot of seniors and a lot of retirees on a fixed income for this program. The median income was $31,000 a year for our participants. But if you look at the distribution across the area median income, the bulk of our participants were in the very low income range. They were in that 0 to 30% income range. So if you look at this table, it goes through everybody that was roof qualified, that expressed interest in the program, and you can see how the numbers start dropping. The more steps you have in the program, the more people you're going to lose every step of the way. So people would have to sign up with us, tell us they were interested in solar for all and they thought they qualified. We had to send them over to the Department of Energy and Environment to make sure they were income qualified according to the district. People that started that income qualification, we lost about 40 people in that step. Some people were not income qualified, especially those that were self-employed. It was a little harder to calculate those income levels with the district's formula, so we lost a few people there. But at the end of the day, we had 83 participants that were deemed income qualified by the district. Of those 83, 77 signed contracts. Unfortunately, 2 of those 77 signed contracts were in historic zones here in the district, and we were not able to obtain permission from the Historic Preservation Board to go through with their installations. And 2 more decided they didn't want to go through with their installation because of the time it took to obtain the permits. By the time we got their permits, they had changed their mind. So at the end of the day, we ended up installing 73 systems. It took about 206 days from the time they signed their contract to the time they got their permission to operate. And on average, it took 47 days from installation to permission to operate. Our average system size was 4.22 kilowatts, which was higher than the district was expecting. When we designed this program, the district was expecting a 3.5 kilowatt average size to offset 50%, but what we saw was that we had a lot of homes that were not energy efficient and that required larger system size in order to meet that 50% offset. And on average, the program cost is about $3.23 a watt to complete these installations. So here are some of the challenges we faced. Outreach. I can't mention this enough. Outreach is key. The district has all these really good programs for low to moderate income families, but if people don't know they're there, don't know to access them, it's meaningless. The money's just going to sit there if people don't sign up for the program. So outreach was key. Unfortunately, we were not an entity where low-income families were familiar to what we were doing or how we operated. So it took some time to build that trust, to build that connection with low to moderate income families and under-resourced communities in the district. Over a year and a half, we did about 18, 20 information sessions over that period, at least once a month. We were all over the district. We went to Ward 7, we went to Ward 8, we went to area neighborhood commission meetings, which are local civic meetings. We tabled at many events and resource fairs across the district. So basically we were there 2 or 3 days every week for 18 months. We were out in the community talking about the program. And that's what you need to do in a program like this, especially when you're just starting. That outreach is key. We had some problems with the solar renewable energy credit values. When we issued our proposal, our response to the district's proposal, the SRACs were at a much higher value. By the time we got approved for the process, the SRACs had dropped significantly. So that meant we couldn't install the number of systems we had promised the district we were going to install. And thanks to Corey, who you've heard from earlier, we came up with this very creative solution. We partnered with DCSEU, the Sustainable Energy Utility, and basically they would cover the cost of those 5 years of SRAC. They would give us an upfront payment, but the value that they provided was equal if you were doing a spot market. So instead of just selling them as you generate them, if you sell them upfront, you're going to get a lower value. But DCSEU basically took the offset those SRACs, and we were able to install more systems than we originally envisioned with that. There were delays to starting the program. The income verification protocol was not in place until, I would like to say, January. We started recruiting people around November, December, but we didn't have an income verification in place until mid-January. So that did not help because you had people sitting in the pipeline that we couldn't help because we couldn't tell them whether they were approved or not. There were issues with the covenant. Like I mentioned, people were very weary of signing that covenant. They were afraid that the district was going to take their home from them if they signed that covenant. So there's a lot of explanation and a lot of tweaking of the covenant so that people were comfortable with it. One of the biggest issues here in DC was for the income verification. That was done through the LIHEAP portal, the Low Income Housing Energy Assistance Program. DC moved from a paper version to an online only version through that program about 2.5 years ago, which meant that if you wanted to apply to LIHEAP, you had to do so online. For a lot of our seniors, that was a problem because they don't have computers at home. They don't have tablets at home. They depend on the computers and the internet at their senior centers or at their public library. And if you've ever completed a LIHEAP application, there's a long list of documents, all personal information. You don't want to be uploading that in a public computer. So we did a lot of in-person visits where I have to build trust with the customer because I'm asking them to give me a copy of all their sensitive documents, their pay stubs, their social security card, their pension statement. I had to meet with them. They would have all those documents ready, and I would walk them through the application on one of our tablets, upload a copy of the document, show them that we had uploaded it, and show them that nothing was saved on our laptop or our tablets. So there's a lot of trust building in this. Um, During that first installer setup, it took almost a month for the district to approve the language of the installer proposal and contract. There was a lot of back and forth on that contract language approval. There was a certificate of insurance requirements that we kept going back and forth. Thankfully, the other two co-ops selected the exact same installer, so we didn't have to go back to square one and go over those proposals and contracts. Um, because of the delay in permitting, the solar module equipment changed, which meant they had to go back and re-sign new contracts, request permits. There was problems with the racking equipment. During that time, we got hit with tariffs, and the company that was making the racking equipment stateside went out of business. So this is a problem that affected the entire industry, but a lot of these low-income houses were parapet installations, and that company had gone out of business. The installers were trying to get the equipment from China, but the minute they actually got a contract to get the equipment from China, we were hit with tariffs for that kind of equipment. So they had to fork over an extra amount of money just to get the equipment stateside. So all of those things delayed installations. Even though we had signed the first contracts in April, we didn't get installations till October, November of that year. The permitting delays was the big one. Because of solar for all, because of the SREC values in DC and the 30% ITC credit at the time, the number of solar permits in DC doubled overnight. We went from 1,000 permits a year to 2,000 permits a year. The office was overwhelmed, so it was taking what should have been a 3 to 6 week process was taking 3 to 6 months to issue permits. And finally, the covenants, not only were people wary of signing them, they had to be notarized. And if you're working, you don't have the luxury of, oh, let me take 30, 40 minutes and go sign this document so I can send it back. So what we finally got the district to approve was the use of a mobile notary. And basically we were meeting people where they were. If they were home, if they were working, we would show up with the documents in the notary and we would cover the costs and get the document notarized and take it with us. That's how we got most of the covenants notarized. Here are some of our highlights. As you can see, I pointed this earlier, when you break it down by income levels, 50% of our participants were in that 0 to 30% AMI, which means they're very, very low income. And most of them told us they would not have gone solar without Solar for All. Because we focus on ownership, meant that our clients were able to take advantage of the federal tax credit if they had a tax burden. And interestingly enough, when I talk about low to moderate income programs, people think we're like, but they don't have a tax burden. We're talking about low income families. But you have to understand that in the district, that 80% AMI limit is $100,000 for a family of 4. They're going to have a tax burden. So about 30% of our families were able to take advantage of the tax credit. And maybe not all in a year, but they were able to take advantage of the tax credit. And when we asked them, how are the savings helping them? A lot of them say they're now able to cover basic necessities they weren't able to cover before, and they can afford home improvements and repairs that they had been putting off because of this program. To summarize the lessons learned, I would say be realistic when you're setting your goals for a program like this. Um, I know when we initially talked to the district, we were envisioning 200, 300 homes almost. Uh, that is a very ambitious goal. So maybe start smaller and work your way up there. Education is key. People are not going to feel comfortable if they don't understand what they're getting into. So education is crucial to gain that trust, to make them comfortable enough to sign up for the program. Be creative when working on the funding sources. I know that DC is unique in the way it's funding its Solar for All program by taxing or fining polluters and utility companies. That is not something that's available all over the country. So again, moderate income clients do have tax burdens, and they will take advantage of the ITC when it's possible. But most importantly, keep it simple. Like I showed you in that graphic, the more steps there are, the more people you're going to lose every step of the way. So try to keep it as simple as possible. Try to keep it simple, especially when it comes to income verification. I know we're very cautious with taxpayer money, and we have to be. But we really shouldn't make families jump to 20,000 hoops. If they're already qualified for one program that's income-based, they should automatically qualify for these type of programs. You shouldn't make them reapply every time a new program comes up if they're already taking advantage of low-income programs. So, and most importantly, just focus on building a robust pipeline, because you're going to lose people along the way. So you want as many people coming into that pipeline as possible. What's next for us, we are working in 2 Midwest cities. We're working in Indianapolis and Cleveland. In Indianapolis, we're working with the Indianapolis Office of Sustainability. Our goal is to take 20 low-income residents solar, subsidize the systems fully. We're doing the same model we did in DC, where we're integrating the low-income program with the market rate co-op process. And we may couple that with energy efficiency measures so that at the end of the day, their energy offset is 100%. We're still in the process of funding this program, but we have a list of people that are already interested. We have almost 50 participants that have signed up to be part of the program. It's on a first come, first served basis. We're also working in Cleveland, with different models. We're trying a community land trust. We're working with the city of Cleveland in Cuyahoga County. We want to be able to do 10 to 15 homes and either use a grant or buy down a loan, so their systems are fully subsidized. And if they do have to take a loan, it is cash positive from day one. So, and here are some thoughts from some of our co-op members, our Solar for All participants. As you can see, a lot of them are extremely happy with their systems and the savings they're seeing, and they would not have gone solar without this program. And that's it. There's my email. If you have any questions after this is all said and done, I'm happy to answer. So I'm going to stop sharing for now.
Thank you very much, Jasenia.
You're welcome.
We have, we'll pause for one question here. Actually, I think there's one written and one, and somebody who raised their hand, and then we'll go right into the second presentation, but there'll be time for other questions afterwards as well. First question here is, sorry, let me switch to the participant screen there. Too many windows. First person is from Joseph Wingenfeld, and he asks, which group in Cleveland are you working with?
So we are working with the city of Cleveland in Cuyahoga County, and we've reached out to the, and I'm trying to remember, one of the community land trusts, the National Housing Partners in Cleveland. But Cleveland is at the very beginning of talks. We are nowhere near ready to sign up participants. We are still building partnerships and trying to work on creative funding mechanisms.
Okay, super. And we had a question from, it looks like Ron actually lowered his hand. So Ron, if you do have a question after all, feel free to just put it in the Q&A, maybe just any answered it. Next one is from Brett, and the question is, in your experience, do you think it would be possible to run a program like this in a state without SRECs? How important are they in the value proposition?
In DC, they were key. Like I said, DC's funding mechanism is based off the SRECs and the alternative compliance payment. That doesn't mean it's the only funding mechanism. And I'm interested to see what Melina has to say about how Illinois funded their Solar for All program. It makes it a lot easier that we have SRECs, that we have an RPS, and we are finding utility companies. It's something that DC doesn't have to worry when it comes to funding, but that does not mean that there aren't alternative mechanisms. There's on-bill tariffs, there's residential pays. There are many ways and we can get creative and finance these programs. It's just a matter of finding the will.
Another question here from Fred asking, for low-income participants, could a third-party ownership model more fully monetize the ITC credit?
That is the discussion that's been around for a while. If for us, it wouldn't work because we were a nonprofit, so we couldn't monetize the ITC. A lot of the current Solar for All installers under DC's program are using PPAs or third-party ownership, where they monetize the ITC and those SRECs to completely cover the systems. We wanted to focus on ownership because of the equity component. But yeah, it's a model that's been working here as well.
Thanks, Yesenia. So I think folks have more questions. Feel free to put them in. We'll leave some time at the end, but I want to, at this point, transition to Melina and her presentation. So Melina, if you could share your screen and take it away. Oh, great, you're already there.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Melina from the Environmental Law and Policy Center, and I'm talking today about Illinois' Solar for All program. I think there's some name sharing going on here. And you know, when I was asked to do this, I was told the subject was addressing the solar equity challenge, this is what we're aiming to do in Illinois. I don't think we or any other program has fully figured it out yet. I'm trying to figure out how to advance my slides. There we go. So just a second on ELPC. We are a Midwest public interest environmental advocacy group. So that typically means environmental lawyers. I'm not a lawyer. I work on the public policy side. And we work on the state level across the Midwest on a wide range of environmental issues. I work on clean energy issues and particularly on solar access throughout our territory and in Illinois. The Illinois Solar for All program is a program that was created by law. And I thought it would be good to put some of the language of the statute up here to give you a sense of the goals of that went along with that program. First, the objection of bringing PV, solar photovoltaics, to low-income communities to create a long-term low-income solar marketplace. Also, the Illinois Solar for All program includes some job training goals. And then there was a goal that a portion of the projects installed be located in environmental justice communities. So 25% of the projects be located in environmental justice communities. So these were sort of the goals that we had when putting this program into place. Within the overall program, there are actually 4 different sub-programs. There's the distributed generation sub-program. That's my least favorite name because it's the least descriptive. But that's basically rooftop solar for either single-family homes or multi-family homes. There's also a nonprofits and public facilities sub-program. this is specifically for nonprofits and public facilities that serve low-income communities and environmental justice communities, such as, for instance, churches in some of our environmental justice communities and others, to go solar. There was also 2 different community solar sub-programs, and I thought I'd take just 1 second to explain what community solar was, in case not everyone has run across it yet. So community solar is shared off-site solar facilities for folks who can't or don't want to install solar on their homes. So the idea is you basically get a subscription to a portion of a solar installation. This little image that I've put up is the idea is to give you a visual idea of how it would work. Most of the community solar projects we see in Illinois are far bigger than this picture. So those are the 4 SOAP programs, 1 sort of rooftop residential, 1 for low-income and environmental justice nonprofits and public facilities, and then 2 focused on community solar. I thought the next thing that might be interesting would be to sort of, so we passed this legislation back in December 2016, but I wanted to talk through what has gone on between December 2016 and today, and the things that had to happen to get the program up and running. So there's a lot of text on your screen right now. So first I'll just talk to, you can see that, the first line is when we passed the law in 2016. And then the first line highlighted in green in 2019, last year, was when the program finally opened. So just the first thing I'll note is that it took a really long time to get this program set up and ready to go. That involved developing a plan to run the program, submitting lots and lots of comments on how different aspects of the program would work, and then selecting a program administrator and having the program administrator sort of build up the infrastructure, the website, the forms, the process to actually run the program. The one thing I'll highlight from this period in terms of sort of the processes that went on is, I mentioned earlier that there was a goal of having 25% of the programs, of the projects located in environmental justice communities. One thing we had to do in Illinois, which I see as extra positive for this program, was to map our environmental justice communities. So we had to figure out how we would identify them and where they were. So this mapping was just for this program, but I think it was also the first time in Illinois where we've undertaken to try to do this, and it sort of ended up lending, I think, helps to shine a light and move the conversation forward with regard to EJ communities generally, in terms of, for those who want the designation, being able to point to official recognition of their status. In any case, the first green line there you see is when the program first launched in May of 2019. And then the next lines are red, which is when the program closed again in June of 2019. So they actually had a sort of pretty short initial opening period to deal with the first applications that would come through, and then basically immediately closed again. Just in the case of the community solar subprogram, they got way more applications than there was room in the program. In the case of the other program, other programs that didn't, subprograms that didn't end up being the case. But they closed anyway. So they're open for a very short period to get the first initial applications and to really kick the wheels, test the program out. And then what you see is they sort of finally opened again in September of 2019. Again, they got the community solar sub-program filled up right away, but the other two sub-programs were able to reopen in October and remained open for a while for applications. So the rooftop residential sub-program, which is known as distributed generation, is actually still open right now. And the nonprofit and public facility program, that sub-program, the incentives available for the particular year got used up in February. So while we passed this legislation back in 2016, it didn't open until 2019, and it hasn't been open very long. We had about a month last spring, summer, and then we had since September, October of last year that anyone's even been able to begin applying for this program. So what have we seen in that sort of short period? This is a graph showing the projects under development or the projects that have already been built by the different sub-programs. Technically, there have been 2 different years of funding available to Solar for All. However, as you saw on the last slide, they sort of all went out last year. So we've seen about 8 megawatts of community solar projects get awarded incentives through the sub-program. This doesn't include 2 additional projects that have been awarded incentives from the pilot procurement. You saw in my sort of breakdown of the sub-program that there was an extra community solar pilot sub-program, and there's not the same level of information available about that sub-program as the other ones. But we've seen about 8 megawatts, probably, if you add those other 2, let's say closer to 12 or 13 megawatts of community solar. We've seen about 4 megawatts of nonprofit and public facility projects. And then we get to distributed generation, which I said is the rooftop residential space for this program. And we've seen we've been slower to see success there. We saw one very large project get funded fairly quickly, 1 2-megawatt project. And then we just recently, just in March, actually, since Illinois got shut down, we've been in isolation, saw the first 9 projects get funded on small residential rooftops on folks' homes. And so that sort of segment of the program is just beginning to take off. And I think, yeah. So I'll talk in the future slides about some of the challenges and opportunities that are facing that program, that sub-program. But I do think that we will see, barring complications from COVID, which makes it pretty hard, I think, for installers to get out into the community and sell solar systems and install solar systems. I was expecting to see an uptake, further uptake in the system, in this sub-program, and I think there are some challenges facing the residential rooftop side of the program, but it's also a side of the program that takes longer to get up and running and is slower to take off than larger projects sometimes are. The other thing I thought I'd show is some of the results from the job training that got funded alongside this program. I'm going to vastly oversimplify how complex our law was, but it was an initial goal of the Illinois Solar for All program to partner with job training. And related to passing the Solar for All legislation, there was funding created for solar pipeline job training. The graphs I'm showing up on the screen come from the first annual report of the solar pipeline job training program. Now, if you recall from a couple slides back, it actually took a couple years to get our Solar for All program up and running. So this is from the year of pipeline training that happened before the program launched. And you'll see that even without the program launched, that solar pipeline training has actually had, I think, my understanding, and I'm not a job training specialist, but my understanding is pretty good success in getting enrollees to complete the program and placed in jobs. So you'll see, with 69% of unemployed enrollees placed within 60 days and 80% placed within 180 days. I think that, part that speaks to the programs, but also part of what you're seeing here is probably reflects that the state of Illinois passed larger solar programs, not just the low-income solar program at the same time. So the whole solar market is growing, or was growing prior to COVID in Illinois. So, I think in terms of the next step for us, I still view this program as in its very early days. I think we've had, barely 6 months in being up and running, and so I don't think that I can fully give you the same sort of lessons learned and retroactive view as Jasenia gave. But I think there are some sort of clear next steps facing the program. The first does have to do with COVID. I think that the situation that we're in now with folks not able to get out in the community and sell face-to-face, to do the education that's necessary to get communities understanding what solar is, understanding what the program is. People can be pretty skeptical. Some of the folks out there doing the offerings for us in Illinois are offering no cost, like Solar United Neighbors was, and I think that can be an offer that inspires skepticism. So how to go about moving this program forward, and particularly the stuff that involves meeting with customers and building on their roofs at this moment, I think there's a big question mark, and I think some of the work is paused. And there's some great installers out there trying to think through creative solutions to get work done virtually. More broadly, I alluded this already in this presentation, but I think Illinois faces a question about how to improve the distributed generation subprogram, and that's like I said, the subprogram focusing on residential rooftop customers. I think there have been a number of challenges here, but primarily, I think giving that market more time is really important. And then I think improving the tie-into job training coordination now that the program is up and running will be another place to look, and then how to increase deployment. And the last thing I'll say is, Jasenia talked about equity through ownership, and that's something that's contemplated in Illinois, and I don't think it's something we've fully figured out yet. But I think that's a focus after we fix our distributed generation program.
Alina, thank you so much for taking the time to present that. We've got some great questions here for you. The first one, Ron actually put his question back in. Maybe we could start with you. Jasenia, if you have an opinion, feel free. But Ron's question is, the solar industry has lost over 100,000 jobs in March. What type of impact is this having on funding resources, and how does it impact the Solar for All model?
Okay. So for Solar for All, the job loss doesn't impact directly solar for all under DC's funding mechanism. Remember, DC solar for all is funded through fines on the utilities for not meeting the renewable portfolio standards. What may have an impact on those fines is a lot of these businesses downtown, which are the top consumers of electricity, are shut down. So that's going to lower our consumption, and it may make it easier for them to meet that 5%. Though last time I checked, we were nowhere near the solar carve out. So I don't think that itself is going to affect the funding mechanism for solar for all. What may affect the funding mechanism is if the district has a shortfall in their budget, which I believe they're projected to do. In the past, if at the end of the fiscal year there's any unused monies, the council takes it back. So it's going to be up to DOE and DCSEU to make sure that the money that has been committed to solar for all goes out of the door before the end of the fiscal year. And the fact that we've lost so many solar installer jobs may complicate that.
Great, thank you. Next question I think is it's a general one, so you might, hopefully you can handle it as well. Is would you just give a kind of a brief explanation of what environmental justice areas are from your understanding, and maybe some examples of what that might look like?
That's more Melina. Yeah, I can try to riff, but I'll wait till Melina gets back.
I can take that,
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Melina.
Yeah, no, so environmental justice, just as a concept, I'll start there, is that there, are some communities and populations and areas that have been disproportionately impacted by pollution and environmental issues, and disproportionately bearing the burden of those issues. And those communities often align with racial and income equity issues. And so, that's the nutshell, I would say. It's that identifying where those communities are for Illinois in our state and trying to, bring some of the benefits of clean energy to those communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the burden of pollution is the concept in a nutshell.
Thank you. The next question is from Dave, and I think it's a clarification for the Illinois program. Is the community solar projects for Illinois, are they solely for solar for all participants, or were there larger other projects as well?
So Illinois has a general market program in addition to the Solar for All program. So there are incentives for non-Solar for All participants that are outside of the Solar for All program. I think that may answer the question.
Okay, super, thank you. Elena, if you're able to take questions still, I've got a few more. If not, we can just circle back to folks after the
I am,
session.
and for folks looking at my empty desk, I'm sorry, I'm also enjoying COVID and being a mom and have a crying child at the same time. So I apologize.
No worries. We're all living the same dream. Next question here is from Sean, and what was the initial funding amount in Illinois? Was it adequate to accomplish the initial goals, in your opinion?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch it. The initial what amount?
The initial funding amount for the program, and was it adequate to accomplish the goals?
Yeah, so the funding, there's actually some ongoing funding for the program. It's through the two different pools of funding. There was about sort of $250 million in funds left over from funds intended to go through renewable energies that, for various reasons, prior to 2016, weren't being spent for that. And then there's sort of ongoing funding intended to fund Illinois' renewable portfolio standard collected by a small charge on ratepayers' bills. I think that's netting about maybe 30 million a year, but I don't remember off the top of my head. I'd be happy to find out and get back to someone though.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question, on the chart that you had with the pie chart for the trainees, how many trainees do the percentages in the pie charts represent? And how was the training accomplished? Was it a local community college or some other educational institution?
I don't know the number, the total number. It was in the, I believe it was in the hundreds. But and I think like 100 or 200 max, not much higher. There were a number of different applicants for a number of different providers. There was sort of the funding for that solar training pipeline was made available through the utility, one of our utilities, even though it was statewide funding, and then a variety of different providers applied for that program. So you had some were community colleges, some were community organizations. I think it really ran the gamut. I should mention that there was also other job training provided in addition to the solar pipeline. I don't think that that saw some of the same placement outcomes as the solar training, but it hasn't been as good to date. And some of the other trainers, I think there are programs in both sets of programs through the unions, and there were some sort of historical job training providers in our community that got sort of direct funding as well.
Thank you. This next question is for Jasenia. It sounds like there were some consistent systemic barriers with the DC program. Have you developed any policy best practices or goals that would remove those barriers to solar access?
Good question, Hannah. Thank you for that. I know that we had a very long talk at the end of the first round period with the district, with the Department of Energy and Environment, over what worked and what kind of changes should be implemented in the program. I don't think they've taken those to heart yet. We are writing a paper discussing all of these options, but one of the biggest challenges, especially for single family homes and rooftop solar, was the quality of the roofs for low-income families. One of the things that we've been pointing out from day one is that the program should include some funding for either roof repair, or the district should work closely with other programs that are already in place in the district. The district has a program that can help families do roof repair, and even though we asked for over a year to be connected with those programs and use that roof repair program as a pipeline for solar for all, DOE was never able to make that happen. I think it's also easier if there's like a one-stop shop for a lot of these families, so they don't have to submit multiple applications every time they want to take advantage of one of these under-resourced programs. They're all going to be asked the same information over and over again. Why not make it one stop, one application, and help them qualify for all of their services at once? I think those two would definitely increase the amount of people in the pipeline and make it easier for families to move forward.
Great, thank you. And the last question I think we have time for here, Jasenia, for you and the DC program, and I think this is probably applicable, in Illinois as well. But who did you find in the community, since outreach was a challenge? Which groups and types of groups did you find to be the most successful or helpful messengers to your program?
Housing counselors. We worked with a lot of the housing counseling agencies in the district. They are already working with under-resourced communities, helping them either stay at home or actually buy and purchase homes through down payment assistance programs. So they were a good referral source. And then we also partner with the Office of Aging, which is a government office. But as you can see from our numbers, a lot of our participants ended up being seniors that benefited from the Office of Aging programming. And they already trust the Office of Aging. There's a lot of requirements when you're participating in one of their table events. You can't be selling the seniors that come to those events, selling them on things. So the seniors felt comfortable coming up to the table and talking to me because they know I had already been vetted by the Office of Aging and I wasn't trying to hook them into a scam or anything. So that made it easier. So it's finding those partners that are already working with the community that have already earned their trust and going through them to be able to earn the community's trust as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So thank you to Jasenia and to Melina, both for your expertise and sharing today. We've got a couple more questions. I will send those to the presenters, and we can circle back with answers offline there. Just want to let folks know we'll be sharing these slides to participants, as well as a recording of this, which we'll post to our YouTube channel. If you look in the Q&A, you'll see that there, and we'll also follow up to participants with that information. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Really appreciate it, and take care and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.